If you have type B negative blood, there is a genetic combination sitting inside your veins right now that makes you one of the rarest humans on planet Earth. And there's a very real chance that at some point in your life, that blood type will save someone else's life, or demand that someone save yours. Type B negative is present in less than 2% of the global human population, which means you are statistically rarer than naturally green-eyed people, rarer than naturally red-haired people, rarer than almost any visible trait a human can carry, but unlike those visible traits that people can see on your face, your blood type sits invisibly inside your veins, a genetic secret that most people with type B negative blood spend their entire lives never truly understanding. If you've ever wondered why blood banks call you for donations specifically, why finding compatible blood during a medical emergency is genuinely dangerous, or why your blood type matters in ways that most people's simply doesn't, stay with me because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your blood is valuable, why it's rare, and why the story behind it stretches back through thousands of years of human migration and survival. Here's the uncomfortable truth that almost nobody wants to talk about. If you have type B negative blood and you get into a serious accident, if you hemorrhage during surgery, if you face any medical emergency requiring urgent blood transfusion, finding compatible blood could literally be a matter of life and death. Blood banks around the world maintain emergency supplies of type B negative blood, not as a courtesy, but as a necessity, because the alternative is watching people with type B negative blood die on operating tables, while surgeons wait desperately for compatible blood that might take hours to find. You can only receive blood from type B negative or type O negative donors, a pool so small that in many parts of the world the entire available supply could fit in a few bags. This isn't theoretical. This isn't something that might happen someday. This is a genuine medical vulnerability that follows you through every moment of your life, a genetic rarity that creates real, practical dependence on the generosity and the blood of other type B negative donors scattered across the planet. That's the dramatic reality that makes type B negative blood genuinely significant. But understanding where that blood type actually comes from requires stepping back into genetics, into deep human migration, and into one of the most fascinating stories of how two completely separate genetic systems converged to create one of Earth's rarest human blood types. Let's start with the genetic mechanics because they're genuinely interesting and they directly explain why type B negative is so rare. Your blood type is determined by two separate genetic systems working independently, and you have to inherit the right variants from both systems simultaneously to end up with type B negative blood. The first system is the ABO blood group controlled by a single gene on chromosome 9 that decides whether your red blood cells display A antigens, B antigens, both, or neither. If you carry at least one B allele, you have B antigens on your red blood cells, making you type B, regardless of what else you inherit. The second system is the Rh blood group controlled by a different gene on chromosome 1, and this one decides whether you carry the RhD protein on your red blood cells or not. If you don't carry it, if you inherited non-functional versions of this gene from both parents, you're Rh negative. Here's where it gets rare. The B allele itself is relatively uncommon outside of Asia. The Rh negative trait is relatively uncommon outside of Europe. To be type B negative, you need to inherit the less common B allele from one or both parents, and you need to inherit Rh negative status from both parents. That's a specific combination of two separate genetic events, both of which are already uncommon, combining in the same person. The statistical probability of this combination is extraordinarily low, which is exactly why type B negative blood sits at less than 2% globally, making it genuinely one of the rarest blood types on Earth. But here's what makes this story genuinely fascinating. That rarity isn't random. It's not coincidence. It's the direct result of human migration patterns stretching back thousands of years, of specific populations living in specific regions, carrying these variants at high frequencies, and of the historical mixing between those populations creating the distribution patterns we see today. Stay with me, because the geographic story behind type B negative blood is where this becomes genuinely powerful. Type B blood variants reached their highest frequencies in Asian populations, particularly in East Asia, Central Asia, and parts of the Middle East, spreading through those populations over thousands of years. The most credible scientific theory suggests type B variants originated in Central Asia roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago among populations transitioning from hunting and gathering to pastoral lifestyles, populations that were in close contact with domesticated animals and engaged in intensive trade networks across the Eurasian steppes. As these populations migrated and mixed with neighbors, the type B variants spread with them, reaching extremely high frequencies in some East Asian populations, where it's now found in 10 to 20% of some populations, compared to less than 10% in most European populations, and even lower percentages in most African populations. The Rh negative trait followed a completely different geographic path. Rh negative is most common in European populations, particularly in Northern and Western Europe, where it reaches frequencies as high as 15 to 20% in some regions. It's far rarer in Asian populations and rarer still in African populations, with the highest Rh negative frequencies outside of Europe found in Central Asian populations that have experienced significant historical mixing with European-descended populations. This geographic distribution tells a clear story. Rh negative arose and reached high frequencies somewhere in Europe or near Europe, then spread through human populations through mixing and migration. What makes type B negative so extraordinarily rare is that it requires combining a trait common in Asia with a trait common in Europe, a combination that only reaches meaningful frequencies in populations that have significant ancestry from both sources, or that sit at the geographic or historical intersection where those two populations would have mixed. This is why type B negative reaches its highest global frequencies in regions that sit at the crossroads of Asian and European populations historically, in places like Central Asia, in regions with significant mixed ancestry, in populations that have experienced significant contact and mixing between Asian and European-descended peoples. Understanding this geographic pattern is genuinely fascinating because it tells us something profound about what your blood type actually represents. If you have type B negative blood, you're literally carrying genetic evidence of human movement, of populations crossing continents, of the mixing of ancestries that would have been separated by thousands of kilometers and thousands of years of history before they finally encountered each other. Your blood type is a genetic snapshot of migration and mixing that took tens of thousands of years to produce. The story of how type B blood reached Asia is genuinely interesting and connects directly to the broader story of human population history. The prevailing scientific theory proposes that type B blood variants originated in Central Asia roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, possibly among populations transitioning from hunter-gatherer lifestyles to pastoral and agricultural economies. These populations, living in close contact with domesticated animals, engaged in intensive trade and mixing networks across the Eurasian steppes and eventually into Asia. As these trade networks expanded, as populations migrated, as people from different regions encountered each other and intermarried, the type B variants spread with them. They moved east into East Asia, reaching extremely high frequencies in some East Asian populations. They moved south and west through Middle Eastern and Central Asian populations. Over thousands of years, the type B variants traveled along the same migration routes that carried languages, technologies, and cultural practices. The Rh negative trait followed a completely different geographic and temporal path. Rh negative appears to have originated through a mutation or deletion in the ancestral human population, a genetic change that disrupted the gene responsible for producing the Rhd protein. This mutation, this loss of a protein that almost everyone else carries, somehow reached high frequencies in European populations, particularly in Northern and Western Europe, where it's now found in 10 to 20% of some populations. The reason Rh negative reached such high frequencies in Europe while remaining rare elsewhere remains genuinely debated. Some researchers propose that Rh negative might have offered some subtle advantage related to disease resistance or immune function, but these hypotheses remain speculative and largely unproven. Others argue that Rh negative frequencies are simply the product of genetic drift and migration patterns, with no active selection pressure maintaining the trait. What's clear is that Rh negative is far rarer in Asian populations and rarer still in African populations, with the highest Rh negative frequencies outside of Europe found in Central Asian populations that have experienced significant historical mixing with European-descended populations. Now here's where the dramatic implications of this rarity become clear. If you have type B negative blood, your blood type is literally a genetic record of human migration, of populations moving across continents, of the mixing of Asian and European ancestries. Your blood type is rare because your ancestors came from specific regions, carried specific genetic variants, and mixed with other populations in ways that eventually produced you sitting here right now, carrying one of Earth's rarest blood combinations inside your veins. But that rarity creates something else. It creates genuine medical danger. In the moment of a medical emergency, in the moment when you need blood and you need it now, the rarity of your blood type becomes a threat to your survival. Surgeons operating on you, doctors trying to stabilize you after an accident, obstetricians managing a complicated delivery, all of them immediately confront the same problem: finding compatible blood. There's no time to wait. There's no time to search across state lines or international borders. The blood needs to be there now. And if it isn't, if the local blood bank doesn't have type B negative in stock, if the emergency supply has already been used, people die. This is not theoretical. This is medical reality. That's why understanding the genetics behind your blood type matters. Because type B negative isn't just rare, it's medically significant in ways that most blood types simply aren't. Here's something that genuinely surprises people the first time they hear it. Your blood type doesn't determine your personality, despite what millions of people in East Asia genuinely believe. In Japan and South Korea, blood type personality theory, the idea that your blood type determines your temperament, compatibility, career suitability, and romantic potential is widespread enough to influence real-life decisions. Some people refuse to hire someone based on blood type. Some people end relationships over blood type incompatibility. Some people choose dates based on blood type matching. This entire cultural mythology has zero scientific basis, zero evidence, absolutely nothing supporting it beyond cultural tradition and commercial marketing. Yet it persists, affecting millions of people's lives in measurable ways. It's a perfect example of how humans attach meaning to biological traits regardless of whether that meaning has any basis in reality. But the real significance of type B negative blood, the thing that actually matters, is medical. And it becomes especially significant if you're a woman and you're pregnant. Here's something that almost nobody talks about, but that represents one of the most serious medical implications of being Rh negative. If you're an Rh negative woman pregnant with an Rh positive fetus, your immune system can develop antibodies against the Rh protein during pregnancy or delivery. This process, called Rh sensitization, happens because your blood and your baby's blood can mix during pregnancy, particularly during delivery, and if they mix, if your immune system encounters the Rhd protein on your baby's red blood cells, it might identify it as foreign and attack it. your body starts producing antibodies against that protein. In your first pregnancy, this usually doesn't cause major problems because your immune response isn't strong enough yet. But in subsequent pregnancies, if you have another Rh-positive baby, those antibodies cross the placenta and attack that new baby's red blood cells directly. This is hemolytic disease of the newborn, and it can cause anemia, jaundice, brain damage, and death. This condition killed countless infants throughout human history. Mothers who had one healthy Rh-positive baby would lose subsequent Rh-positive babies, and nobody understood why. The pattern of loss, the heartbreak of losing babies who seemed perfectly healthy during pregnancy, but died or suffered severe damage after birth, persisted for centuries until the Rh system was finally understood in the 1940s. Even after the discovery, until RhoGAM immunoglobulin was developed and became standard medical care, Rh-negative women faced a genuine medical tragedy. Carrying an Rh-positive fetus represented real danger to that fetus and to any future Rh-positive children they might have. Modern medicine has largely solved this problem. RhoGAM, given to Rh-negative women during pregnancy and immediately after delivery, prevents their immune system from developing those dangerous antibodies. Hemolytic disease of the newborn from Rh incompatibility has become genuinely rare in developed countries with access to modern obstetric care. But it remains a real medical issue, a real complication that Rh-negative women have to think about and plan for, a constant reminder that their blood type carries medical significance that most people never have to think about. Think about that for a moment. Your blood type carries consequences that affect whether you can safely have certain pregnancies, that determine whether you can receive blood from almost anyone, or whether you're dependent on finding one of the rare type B negative donors. Your blood type determines medical vulnerability in ways that almost nobody else experiences. The history of how blood types were discovered and understood is genuinely fascinating because it represents one of the great breakthroughs in medical history. Carl Landsteiner discovered the ABO blood groups in 1900 through careful experimentation, and that single discovery transformed medicine forever. Before Landsteiner, blood transfusions were genuinely dangerous, essentially gambling with people's lives, because nobody understood why some transfusions worked and others caused severe reactions or death. After Landsteiner's discovery made blood typing possible, transfusions became safe and reliable. Surgery became safer. War became less deadly because wounded soldiers could receive blood transfusions. Medicine advanced because one man figured out that blood types mattered. The Rh system was discovered much later in 1940 by Landsteiner and Alexander Wiener. This discovery explained the mystery of hemolytic disease of the newborn, a condition that had killed or severely damaged countless infants, but whose cause remained completely mysterious until the Rh system was identified. Suddenly, doctors understood why some pregnancies resulted in healthy babies and others in tragedy. Suddenly, the medical implications of Rh incompatibility became clear. Yet these discoveries, made within the last 130 years, represent relatively recent additions to human medical knowledge. For most of human history, people with type B negative blood had no idea they were medically rare, no idea their blood was valuable, no idea that they were part of a small genetic community united by medical vulnerability and medical significance. Modern DNA testing can now predict your blood type directly from genetic samples, can tell you exactly which variants you carry, can map your blood type variants onto broader population patterns, showing which ancestral populations most likely carried those specific genetic combinations. If you're type B negative, a DNA test can tell you that somewhere in your ancestry you have people from populations where type B variants are common and people from populations where Rh negative variants reached high frequencies, and that the mixing of those lineages is what produced you. Think about that. Your blood type is literally a genetic map of your ancestry, a record written in the DNA of your red blood cells, telling the story of where your ancestors lived, which populations they came from, and how they mixed across thousands of years. Your blood type is rare because your ancestry is specific, because your ancestors carried specific genetic variants from specific populations and passed them down to you through unbroken chains of inheritance stretching back thousands of years. So the next time you donate blood, the next time a blood bank calls asking for type B negative donors, the next time you think about your blood type as just a medical label, remember what it actually is: a genetic record of human migration, a thread connecting you to ancestors who lived in specific regions thousands of years ago, a marker of medical significance that makes your blood valuable in ways that most people's blood simply isn't. Your blood type is rare, and that rarity makes you medically significant, medically vulnerable, and medically valuable to the small group of people who might someday depend on your blood to survive. You are not just carrying blood, you are carrying history, and that history matters. Comment below and tell me your blood type, and tell me if it runs in your family or if you're the only one with type B negative blood in your bloodline, because family patterns around blood type tell us exactly how these rare variants spread through populations and how they end up creating people like you. Subscribe, because next time we're revealing another trait hiding a complete ancestral story inside your DNA, and trust me, it's just as surprising and just as significant as this one.